I don't know if you guys knew this, but there was a LAN like a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty hype. I haven't talked about it yet, so I'm gonna do that now. Alright, let's get into it. Demos have taken over the meta, and they've taken over so much that I made an entire video on just that subject. And in that video, I talked about NRG as an example of how to get offensive production without using demos. But an even better example showed up in the Winter Major, because Furia was one of the most demo-averse teams that I've seen in a while, only having 1.71 per game. This was well behind the next team in Evil Geniuses, who had 2.15, and was more than 3 demos per game behind version 1, who was in first place. But despite that, Furia still had great success on offense. They finished 7th in goals per game as a team in that event, and they had some good results, beating Endpoint twice and NRG once. Even their losses were pretty impressive, taking the winners G2 to 6 games, and the runners-up Queso to 7, and getting swept by Renegades. Okay, that last one was a little less impressive, but CJ just doesn't lose to South America. And the point still stands that this team looked really good en route to the highest placement ever for a South American team at an international competition. Furia have stayed away from a demo game plan for pretty much all of the season, and they've even decreased their demos per game as the season's gone on. But that hasn't hurt them at all, and it definitely didn't hurt them during the Major, where they had their lowest demo total of the season for any single event. But in addition to not having many demos, they also had a general lack of speed throughout the entire event. Card and Kyle were the bottom 2 players in average speed, and Jan was a little bit faster, finishing near the middle of the pack in average speed. And they also... Sorry y'all, I gotta take this. Yo. Wait, really? Yanks? Alright. So, Yanks was a little bit faster, finishing near the middle of the pack. On top of being last in average speed, they were also last in boost used, second to last in boost stolen, and second to last in time spent in the offensive third. Typically, this lack of speed and aggression would be a death sentence for teams, especially against this level of competition, but it worked out pretty well, for a couple reasons. 1, Yanks was playing on another level for the entire event, especially with his passing and possession. He finished second in assists, behind only Monkey Moon, and even if his passes weren't immediately turning into goals for his teammates, he would still do a great job of getting the ball to him and giving them opportunities to make a play. He also did a great job of possessing and controlling the ball, keeping it safe whenever he had a dribble going, both on the ground and in the air, but he was especially lethal when he took the ball from defense to offense with his perfect air dribbles. Another reason why Fury did so well was Kaio and his ridiculous shooting. He was 4th in the event in goals per game, and was tied with Khan for the highest shooting percentage, getting 1 goal for every 3 shots. Whenever Yanks or Card set him up with a shooting opportunity, he would make sure that it didn't go to waste. And it's really good that he was shooting so well, because he didn't show much interest in doing anything else on offense, having the 2nd fewest assists per game. But with Yanks possessing the ball so much, and so well, Kyle really didn't have to possess the ball all that much. So in short, he only had to focus on 2 things: putting the ball in the opponent's net, and keeping the ball out of their own net whenever opponents took a shot. Everything in between, in the midfield, he let his teammates handle. You can see both of them execute their role perfectly here. It starts with Squishy taking an air dribble, and Card going up in the air to contest him. But after the dribble fails, the ball falls down to Yanks, who starts the ground dribble. Justin is charging in at him, looking to rush him into a challenge. But Yanks still plays it patiently and gets a soft initial touch on the ball, with Justin right in his face. Then at the last second, he double jumps, quickly elevating to avoid Justin and keeping the ball pretty close to his car. But after Justin's challenge, Garrett is now diving in, looking to take the ball away while Yanks is vulnerable. But to speed up his recovery, he angles his car towards the ball and towards the ground during his air roll, all while boosting. This brings him closer to the ball and down to the ground faster, letting him pull off a fast and clean recovery. So now, he's able to beat Garrett to the ball, and he pops the ball over him as he flips in for the challenge. The pop sends the ball straight up and over to Kaio, who was driving right alongside Yanks that entire time. The net is actually wide open on his first touch, but he's a little bit too far underneath the ball to get a powerful shot on target, and he ends up getting a flip reset instead on his first touch. And the reset doesn't go quite as planned, at least I don't think it did. He probably wanted to use the flip reset to get a second hit on the ball to send it to the goal faster since it was so open. But he's falling away from the ball too quickly and doesn't have enough boost to get back to the ball for a clean shot. So instead, he flies outside of the ball and looks to block Justin's angle of the save, which he does perfectly. He completely stuffs Justin's touch and sends the ball back into the goal, showing some great improvisation in every aspect of the shot. And I can't do all of that talking about Yanks and Kaio without showing some love to Card too. He had a general all-around impact on offense, having good output in goals and assists, and he showed a great ability to do whatever was needed on offense, whether it was taking the shot or finding the pass. But where Card really made his impact on the game was on defense. When a team is going as slow as Furia was for this event, it can be really easy for the opponents to overrun them by pushing the pace and getting them out of position. But Furia wasn't victim to that very often, mostly because of Card working to redirect the opponent's counterattack away from their goal with his midfield positioning and shadow defense, and move the play into their defensive corners, where a teammate could scoop the ball up and take possession, and that would usually be Yanks with an air dribble. To be fair, every player on Furia did this to some extent on defense, because if they're going to play the way that they did with any success, they would have to. But Card did it the most, and if you ask me, he also did it the best. So, yeah, Furia good. NRG had a rough time at the Winter Major, but it's not time for them to panic or anything. In fact, I wouldn't be worried at all. They're still second place in NA, now trailing G2 by only a single point, and they're still comfortably in the top 3 over the rest of NA. And outside of this single event, they've had consistent placements for the entire season. They've only placed 3rd or lower in one event this season, where they lost to Envy in the semifinals of Fall Regional 3. They've been in 8 different competitions so far this season, and they either won or made it to the grand finals in 6 of them. On top of that, the team that knocked them out of the Winter Major was Queso, who made it all the way to the grand finals themselves, and NRG took them to a Game 5 overtime. That match had 2 great teams who were facing off way earlier than you would have expected them to, and Queso barely came out on top, so I'm not really worried about them in the long term at all. But, with that being said, there are some things that NRG needs to fix if they want to maximize their chance at a World Championship, because while they are one of the best teams in the world, there are some issues creeping up that could potentially keep them from that crown. First, they're getting into the habit of starting off slowly in tournaments, and not rounding into their true form until the later rounds. This started in the Fall Major, where they lost 2 games in the Swiss stage before recovering and making it to the Grand Finals. And it continued into the Winter, where in the group stages they either took bad losses, or they made wins way closer than they should have been. This was fine in the Fall and Winter split, because with these formats, you were basically given 3 lives to make it to the bracket stage. So NRG had the ability to take a couple L's, and then bounce back in time to make it to the Grand Finals where they belong. But moving into the Spring split, and eventually the World Championship, they aren't going to have this luxury. With the Spring format being a straight double elim bracket, and the World Championship group stage being a double elim gauntlet, if they take a couple L's there, they're going to be out. So they'll definitely need to do a better job of starting out these events in their ideal form moving forward. And the second thing that they'll need to figure out is how to beat European teams, because they haven't been doing a very good job of that this season. In the Fall and Winter Majors, NRG is 1-6 in their series against European teams, with 3 of those losses coming to BDS, 2 coming to Endpoint, and 1 against Queso, while their 1 win came against Vitality. While for most teams, you could say that these are all pretty respectable losses and not anything to get too worked up about, NRG isn't a team who has the benefit of saying that. Because while these are the best teams that Europe has to offer, NRG is among the best that North America has to offer too. And if they want to give themselves a chance at the Spring Major, and especially the World Championship, these are games that they're going to have to start winning. It's really curious that NRG struggles so much against these teams while doing so well against the other top teams in North America. And while I'd love to take a deeper dive into why this may be the case, that would take a lot more time and research than I'm able to put into this video. But for now, I'll just say that this team is still on the short list of World Championship favorites, and I think that they'll clear up both of these issues before the end of the season. Now, while I'm not too worried about NRG, I can't say the same about BDS, because I think the struggles that they're having are a little more concerning. Monkey Moon is still dominant and one of the best players in the world, and proved as much during the Winter Major, where he finished 7th in goals per game, 1st in assists, 7th in saves, and 1st in shots. He was shouldering a heavy burden on both offense and defense, running all over the field to make a play on the ball wherever he could, but he proved to be able to shoulder that burden very well. And then you had Extra putting in his fair share of work too, doing most of it in his normal role of playing second man on defense and shadowing during the opponent's possessions to buy time for Monkey Moon to get back to the goal whenever he could. Extra and Monkey Moon were 1st and 4th respectively in average distance to the ball, so they were always around the play looking to bolster their team's offense and defense. But you begin to notice the problems when you look at Mark Bait's performance, because he really seemed to struggle. With Monkey Moon and Extra doing so much work on the ball so often for this team, it's not uncommon for Mark to have a pretty lackluster stat line for a given event. But even taking that into consideration, Mark had a very poor statistical output. The Winter Major saw Mark have his worst event so far in terms of goals, assists, and shooting percentage, and he really struggled to make a threatening opportunity whenever he had the ball. When I was looking at the stats and gameplay for Mark in this event, there was a pretty big difference in the trends that I was seeing between the two. When watching the game, it felt like Mark was way more passive in defense than we've come to expect from him, since he's usually challenging the ball right away when he gets the chance. And while the stats backed up that notion a little bit, the change in the stats wasn't as big as I would have expected. For example, Mark had 1.38 saves per game, which is a bit above his average for the season, but that's still fewer saves than he had in 3 different events, so he wasn't playing a ton of goal line defense. And his distance to the ball was a bit farther than his average this season, but it wasn't as far as it was in the Fall Major, where BDS went on to win the whole thing. And after looking through it, I think the reason why he seemed so passive in this event had less to do with his own decision making and positioning, and more to do with how his teammates were playing around him. In the major, Mark played with his usual level of aggression on defense, more or less, being tied for third in demos per game in the event. But a lot of the time, when he would go to challenge the ball, there would be another teammate in the area who could also go for the challenge. In the past, they'd usually let Mark go for it and get the clear or the challenge, and put him in the proactive position that he's used to. But in this event, there would be a lot of times where Mark could have gone for the ball, but then one of his teammates would cut him off in rotation and take the ball for himself, filling the role that Mark usually does. With them taking the ball away from Mark so often, he ended up spending more time as usual as farthest man back on the field, which, as I've mentioned before on this channel, this is a position where you're prone to see Mark make a lot of mistakes. And there's no better example of this than this play against G2. It starts with Extra making the save on JNaps' shot after Monkey Moon is bumped out of the play. After this, both Mark and Extra are low on boost, and the ball is going out to Atomic, who's getting ready to send it right back. But Atomic's touch is inaccurate and he can't follow up on it, which means that the ball is now free for BDS to take. Mark Bait is in goal and ready to come in for the next touch. But after his boost grab, Extra quickly turns around to cut rotation and take the ball for himself. And in a vacuum, I don't think this is really a terrible decision. Extra has a full tank of boost now, and Mark is still low, and it's typically better for the player on full boost to have the ball instead of the player on low boost. But in scenarios like this, it's rare for Mark to not be the one to go for the ball for BDS, especially when you consider the circumstances. With Atomic stuck up in the air after his challenge, and Chicago rotating all the way back to his corner boost, the left side of the field is wide open for Extra to run into, and for Mark to pass him the ball. This is something that they've done many times before, and I think it would have served them well here too. But instead of doing that, Extra takes the ball himself and tries to clear it, which doesn't go well at all. The ball doesn't even make it to midfield before Chicago is sending it back. And while this is going on, Mark seems kinda lost on what to do next. He creeps out of the goal a little bit while reading the play, and then turns infield. And interestingly, he turns off ball cam, presumably to get a better view of what's going on around him, but my question is, what was he looking for? The ball, and all players relevant to the play, are visible when he had ball cam on. And since he turned infield, when he turns ball cam off, he loses vision of everything, except Monkey Moon and JNaps. But seeing Monkey Moon apparently didn't help out too much, because he accidentally bumps into him anyways. And since Chicago took a shot with his one touch, it's now up to Mark to try to recover on low boost to get back to make the save. And since he turned upfield after bumping Monkey Moon, instead of turning back towards the goal, that split second difference means that he can't recover in time to make the save. Now, even though I've been pretty hard on Mark for pretty much this entire section, I still have a lot of faith in him. But with his teammates taking the ball away from him so much and cutting him off in rotation, I'm not sure if they have any faith in him anymore. I'm not sure what could have happened to suddenly cause this lack of faith, but if that is indeed the problem, I hope they figure it out before Worlds comes around. Oh, well, I guess that's one way to figure it out. After some pretty average performances in the fall split, Queso came out in the winter looking like a brand new team and officially staked their claim as Europe's best at the moment, winning 2 regionals and finishing 2nd overall at the major. One thing that I always like to do with these top level teams is try to figure out who their best player is and who is the one that enables the team's playstyle. Typically when you look at stats and gameplay, you can find an answer that is at least somewhat reliable. But Queso were lucky enough to have 3 players who all have their moments where they look like the team's best. And with their ability to take over the game in different ways, their opponents need to show respect to each of Queso's players whenever they have the ball. First, you have the former freestyler Enjoyo, who uses his elite mechanics to beat defenders when he has the ball, both in the air and on the ground. And he's constantly setting up his teammates with easy goal scoring opportunities, as he led the team in assists and finished 5th in the entire event. Then you have Rise, who is the team's most aggressive player, leading them in demos and spending the 2nd least time as farthest back in the entire event. And after the winter major, he now leads the team in goals per game for the season. His shooting was on another level for the entire event, leading all players in goals per game and finishing 6th in shooting percentage. He was doing work on and off the ball on the offensive half, and was the finishing touch on so many of their possessions. And finally, you have Buttery, who was their most defensive player on the team in terms of saves, while spending a similar amount of time as Joyo as the farthest back on the field and in the defensive third. But he still managed to be right behind Rise in shots per game, with his fast goal-to-goal playstyle. But if I were to pick one player as my personal favorite for the team, I'd go with Joyo. And not just because I picked him as a player to watch before the season. His high-flying style is so fun to watch, and it enables the rest of Queso in a way that few other players could do. Buttery throws the ball up to Joyo near the ceiling, on the sidewall, and he gets a perfect touch to keep the ball nearby as he jumps off to start the aerial play. At first, his car is angled in a way that could be used to either send the ball directly towards the goal, or if he got a bit more in front of it, down to Rise who was wide open in field. He decides to go to goal, which is pretty common for the Queso players, but he doesn't do it in the normal way. Before he makes contact with the ball, he flips his car around and pulls off one of the nastiest musty flicks you'll see, and sends a rocket towards FaZe's back wall. Sypical isn't even close to making a touch on the ball, and even though Joyo initially lined up his card to go for the double tap, he eventually leans back away from the ball, letting Rise come in and finish off the game winner with a perfectly placed top corner shot. And let me play this clip at full speed so you see just how fast this flick actually was. Sheesh. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really have much to say about this team, at least not anything that I haven't said before. This team is known for speed, aggression, and taking a lot of shots, and that playstyle hasn't missed a beat with the addition of Atomic, although they do take slightly fewer shots now than they did with Drees. Chicago and Atomic were second and third in average speed for the Winter Major, with JNAP sneaking into the top 20, and for shooting, they averaged 9.77 shots per game in the fall with Drees, which was first in the region, but that has dropped down to 8.92 since they added Atomic. Constant pressure and relentless shooting was their primary way, and sometimes their only way of scoring goals in the fall, which resulted in them taking shot after shot until the defense couldn't keep up anymore and finally conceded. Atomic is obviously more than capable of doing that as well, but the best thing that he was able to add to G2 was the ability to create single decisive scoring chances out of any scenario for both himself and his teammates, with the team often only needing one shot to score a goal. This ability is what helped Envy thrive so much off the counterattack while he was with them. So now instead of always taking a straight line to the opponent's side of the field when they get possession, Atomic gives G2 the option to slow the play down and be more methodical while they look for cracks in the opponent's defense, before they even take their first shot. This makes them a bit more efficient with their shooting, as a trade-off for taking less shots than they have in the past. And this new playstyle was on full display in their ridiculous passing play against Queso in the Grand Finals. The ball starts with JNAPS, who's getting chased down by Joyo, so he hits the ball infield to avoid him, giving it to Chicago, who's waiting in the area. Then Chicago hits it right back to him by popping the ball up in the air with his wheels, giving JNAPS an easy aerial to the next touch. And JNAPS sees Atomic open infield, and he decides to pass to him next. But Rise also sees that Atomic is open, so he creeps up to get ready to cut the pass off. But to ensure that he beats Rise to the ball, Atomic pre-jumps the pass for his touch, getting there first. Like, look at how far he is off the ground already when JNAPS makes contact. Just crazy. And even crazier is that Atomic has no options ahead of him with the ball, so he wraps around it to throw a back pass to Chicago. A pre-jump back pass are two words that I never thought I'd be putting together when talking about an RLCS game, but here we are. Then Chicago sends the ball downfield, and Atomic takes flight after it. Vatira makes contact with it on the back wall for the clear, but since Atomic took off so early, he meets him at the point of contact and stuffs him, hitting the ball off the curve between the back wall and the ceiling, and straight down in front of the goal. From there, Chicago has an easy finish, and he scores the goal. This is one of my favorite plays from the entire season so far. And if you think that I wrote this entire section as an excuse to analyze that possession, well, you're not really wrong. But I mean, come on, how could I not? Alright, outro time. And I don't have anything written down, so I'm just gonna kinda wing it. The Winter Major was one of the best experiences I've ever had, for a couple reasons. First, if you don't already know, I got a chance to work with the Kansas City Pioneers as an analyst to help them prepare for the tournament. Unfortunately, we didn't pull out any wins, but I was still really happy with how the team played, and I was really excited about the opportunity. So thank you to them for my first official chance to work with an RLCS team. And I got to go to the event in person, which was more fun than I thought it would be. I got to meet a lot of really cool people, and the tournament was insane. My voice was completely gone after those 2 days, and I didn't regret a second of it. I'm definitely going to be at the World Championship, and I might be at the Spring Major in London. We'll see. But regardless of when it is, I'm already looking forward to going to my next LAN. And I'm looking forward to my next video, which should be out soon. Ish. Maybe. Thanks for watching.